Well, good morning. You're very welcome to the European Parliament here in Brussels, where I speak to you from. I had very much hoped to be in Dublin to join you for your conference because the lineup is important and the subject is absolutely vital for the future, indeed for our own generation, but for generations to come. At the moment, the linear economy is what prevails. So we produce, we consume, and we waste a great deal. And we're not really conscious enough about looking at how we might be more efficient. And what the circular economy is really talking about in a very common sense and practical way is closing the loop. So of course we will produce and consume, but we'll also reuse, we'll look at waste streams, and we will not waste products in the way that we are traditionally doing. And that requires a great deal of change in how we think, in how business operates, in how consumers function. And that's why at the EU level, the Commission have come forward with quite a big package on the circular economy, and this Parliament here will have a huge input into that. So it is really firstly about talking about changing mindsets, and I think a great deal of work has been done with the traditional reuse, recycle mantra, which even our school children are very much familiar with. But the circular economy proposal is going much further, and if you look at the amount of raw materials that are, if you like, being wasted and are non-renewable, we really do have to take a reality check about the way we live today. And the Commission proposal, I'm going to talk to you about sort of 4 key areas in it, is really looking at production, consumption, waste management, and this market for secondary raw materials. And if we look at some of the ideas around production, what we're talking about here is looking at incentivizing the circular product design, looking at innovation in our production systems, looking at an extended producer responsibility idea, best practices for waste management, for resource efficiency in the industrial sectors, and also the idea of remanufacturing. Now, they're just some of the concepts that we're talking about when it comes to production, but the key is durability, repairability, and recyclability. And those are concepts which I think consumers like, and business will also adapt to them because it will make business sense to do that. Let's look at the consumption side of the equation because that's absolutely key. Again, the objective here is about repair and reuse of products and to give consumers reliable information so that we know what we're buying and we know its impact on the environment and whether it meets the objectives and criteria of the circular economy. How is that to be done? Well, what we're talking about here is better labelling, eco-labelling, about the environmental footprint of products. There's also a discussion needed on new forms of consumption, this collaborative economy, digital platforms, and how all that will work, but that's about new thinking. We need to be careful of false gods, false claims about green products, and that's why, again, information that is independently verified will be absolutely crucial for consumers to make informed choices. And clearly public procurement and what governments and local authorities do in this area will be absolutely vital. They need to buy into this concept so that it can spread to the wider economy. If we take waste management, and this is a core aspect here, and there's some very interesting figures about what's wants to be achieved in terms of actions in this area. But what we're talking about here is really sticking with our EU waste hierarchy and trying to make all member states and businesses adhere to those principles, to fill in the gaps where they exist and to make improvements, to help, if you like, guide long-term investment in this area. So let me share with you some of the revised targets for recycling. We're looking at 65% recycling of municipal waste and 75% recycling of packaging waste by 2030. There is a new binding target to reduce landfill to a maximum, and this is a maximum of 10% of total waste by 2030. We're looking at improvements to the waste management, looking at new investments in recycling capacity, and also the role of incineration and mechanical biological treatments. And really we're needing to ensure coherence between waste investments under the cohesion policy and the waste hierarchy. Last but certainly not least is this whole idea of a market for secondary raw materials. And we obviously need to increase the use of secondary raw materials. We need to be careful about water, our basic natural resources, and indeed soils. These are very, very important resources that need to be carefully managed. And some of the key actions in this area will be around the EU regulation on fertilisers, and I know you'll be discussing that. The idea of water usage and reused water, quality standards, and I think that's really important when you're using secondary raw materials so that consumers have confidence that the materials are fit for purpose and well used. We need to look at the interface between chemicals, products and our waste legislation, and obviously we need to track what's happening on waste across borders. I give you very much a short flavour of a very, very big concept. But when you boil down to it, and when I talk to citizens, people don't want to waste. They don't want to waste food, but very often they don't know how to avoid that. And I think this is about joined up thinking between producers, manufacturers, consumers, policymakers, public authorities, to make sure that we secure our environment for the future, because many of the resources that we're using and abusing now will run out. And that's something that we cannot contemplate. We are making products which are being thrown away, and that's something which we cannot continue to do. So the circular economy makes good sense. But lastly, it makes good sense for business because we're talking about jobs and investment and growth and creating a European economy which will stand the test of time. I believe Europe is leading in this area, and I think that's really good. And I think we need all of us to come on board with this. I think one of the key issues for your conversation today is yes, on some of those issues I've talked about, but how we're going to finance this, the role of the investment bank, investment funds, public and private partnerships. But above all else, what this demands of all of us is to think way outside the box. And hopefully it's a cardboard box, a recyclable one. But your job in your deliberations at your conference for the next 2 days is to do that, do the thinking, do the questioning, and talk to us as policymakers to make sure that we, when we're signing off on this really important package, get it absolutely right. Thank you. Have a good conference.